My heart was pounding so loudly that I could hear it echo in the silence of the hallway. My hands trembled as I held the doorknob, unsure if I should turn it or walk away. But something urged me forward, a dreadful curiosity that I could not ignore. It was the night before my wedding, and I thought I had everything under control. I believed my future was safe and full of promise. Yet, in that quiet hour, I sensed something dark and painful waiting for me on the other side of that door. I felt my stomach twist into a knot, and I tried to steady my breathing. I told myself it was just nerves, but deep down, I knew there was more to it than that. The hallway was dimly lit by a single lamp, casting flickering shadows along the walls. I tried to shake off my fears, telling myself I was overreacting. Still, I couldn't move. A heavy sense of dread weighed me down. I could not ignore the nagging feeling that once I pushed open this door, life would never be the same. Then I heard a muffled laugh, a laugh that belonged to my fiancé, and it was followed by a gentle hush from someone else. My ears were ringing, my eyes filled with tears, even before I confirmed what I feared. Every second felt like a slow step off a cliff. I braced myself and turned the knob. The door swung open. At first, I saw only the silhouette of two people in the glow of a single bedside lamp. My heart lurched when I recognized the curve of my fiancé's face. He was not alone. The figure next to him was my own stepsister. They were tangled in each other's arms, whispering words I could not make out. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The walls seemed to spin. Then, as if in a trance, they both turned to see me standing there in shock. In that moment, I felt my world collapse. The moment I witnessed in that room stayed with me, burning in my mind even as my body went numb. I had always trusted my fiancé. His name was Daniel, and he had been my anchor for so long. We started dating 3 years ago, and over those years, we shared dreams and plans. We spoke about starting a family, traveling the world, and building a happy life. He was thoughtful, or at least he seemed that way, and he always reassured me when I felt insecure or scared. My father loved him, and so did my friends. Everyone said we were the perfect couple. I believed that, too, until the truth revealed a hidden side to him that I never suspected. My stepsister, Brianna, was someone I had grown close to over the years, though our relationship was not always smooth. When my mother passed away, my father remarried a woman named Carol. Carol came into our lives with a teenage daughter. That was Brianna. She was always pretty and confident, the kind of girl who could turn heads without even trying. In high school, she had a wide circle of friends and was always going out to parties. I was not like her. I was quieter, more focused on my books and personal hobbies. But over time, we formed a bond, mostly because we were forced to share a home. Brianna and I had arguments now and then, like most siblings. Sometimes she would complain that I got too much attention because I was the quieter one. Other times, I would be upset when she crossed my personal boundaries. But I never hated her. In fact, I wanted us to be closer. There were moments we laughed together, sharing silly secrets or cooking dinner when our parents were busy. She would tell me about her crushes, and I would ask for advice on clothes or hairstyles. I thought we had grown past the rivalry. I believed she was my sister in more ways than just a title. Seeing them together in that room was a shock that tore through every layer of trust one had built. My mind reeled with questions. How long had this been happening? Why had neither of them told me? Did they think I would never find out? Anger and despair swirled within me, freezing me in place. I was supposed to be marrying Daniel the next day, and Brianna was supposed to stand by me as one of my bridesmaids. Our families were scheduled to meet at the chapel in the morning. There were flowers, guests, and an entire celebration planned in my honor. But in that instant, my dream wedding turned into a nightmare. When Daniel noticed me at the door, he jumped out of bed. He tried to speak, but words seemed to fail him. Brianna pulled the sheets around herself, avoiding my eyes, looking equally shocked and frightened. I cannot even recall all the words that were exchanged in that first moment. My ears were ringing, and my eyes were blurred with tears. I remember Daniel moving towards me, stammering something like, "It's not what you think," which only made me feel sicker. Brianna looked as if she had seen a ghost. She kept repeating my name, Alicia, Alicia, as though that would make it all better. I did not shout. I did not even cry out loud. My voice seemed to be trapped inside my chest. I felt a hollow ache in my heart, and I could barely stand. Finally, I managed to turn around and walk away. I heard them calling my name, but I couldn't face them anymore. My feet moved on their own, carrying me away from that painful scene. I ran to the elevator, flew down to the hotel lobby, and out into the cool night air. I just wanted to escape. I found myself in the parking lot, leaning against a pillar, trying to catch my breath. It was late, past midnight, and the city lights glowed in the distance. I stared into the sky, wondering how everything could go so wrong on a night that should have been filled with excitement and joy. The tears came fast, and I could not stop them. There were no words to express the betrayal I felt. My fiancé, the man I thought was going to be my husband, had been sleeping with my stepsister. The shock was suffocating. Memories of our relationship flashed through my mind. Our first date at a small cafe, the night we first said, "I love you," and the day he proposed to me on the beach. I thought those moments were pure and honest. Now they felt tainted, like illusions that masked a hidden truth. I wondered when it started. Had it been months, or even longer? My mind spiraled, imagining secret phone calls and stolen kisses. I felt sick thinking that I had been living a lie. The air felt cold against my skin, or maybe it was my own body shivering with emotion. Part of me wanted to get in my car and drive far away, leaving everything behind. But I had responsibilities. In mere hours, we were supposed to be at the chapel. Family and friends had flown in from various places. The wedding was planned down to the last detail. My father, who had been so proud, would be heartbroken if I canceled everything at the last minute. But how could I marry someone who betrayed me so deeply? I stood there, feeling lost, until I noticed a figure approaching from the side. It was a friend of mine, Rachel, who had stepped outside to look for me. She had arrived earlier to help with some wedding tasks and was staying in a nearby room. Concern was etched on her face as she rushed over to me. "Alicia, are you okay? You disappeared, and I got worried," she said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. I tried to speak, but the words came out in a shaky whisper. "I'm not okay," I admitted, tears still streaming down my cheeks. Rachel pulled me into a hug, and I clung to her. She led me to a nearby bench, away from the cold wind. I hesitated, unsure if I should tell her the full story, but I could not hold it in anymore. My entire life had just been upended. I needed someone to understand the pain that was tearing me apart, so I told her everything. My voice trembled as I described how I found Daniel and Brianna together. Rachel's face shifted from confusion to shock and then to anger. She squeezed my hand, letting me know she was there for me. I felt some relief in sharing my misery, but it did not lessen the betrayal. "What are you going to do, Alicia?" she asked, her voice full of worry. I shook my head. "I don't know," I whispered. "The wedding is tomorrow. Everyone will be there. My father, my relatives, even my coworkers. I can't go through with it now, but I can't just vanish. This is going to hurt so many people." Rachel rubbed my back in a comforting gesture. "You need to do what's right for you," she said. "This is your life, not anyone else's. You don't owe Daniel anything after what he's done." Her words rang true. I was about to commit to a lifetime with a man who clearly did not respect our relationship. The marriage would have been a sham. I thought back to all the times Brianna and Daniel had seemed casual around each other. Sometimes I would see them joking or sharing a harmless laugh, but I never suspected anything deeper. My thoughts turned to the possibility that I had been blind. ignoring signs that something was off. In that moment, I felt waves of anger, sadness, and an odd sense of relief that I had found out before the official ceremony. I could at least walk away without signing any marriage papers. But still, my heart ached. I had been in love with Daniel, or at least a version of him I thought I knew. It was not easy to swallow the truth and uproot all our plans in a single night. Rachel encouraged me to go back to my hotel room and get some rest. But rest seemed impossible. My mind was racing, bouncing between the idea of confronting them further or calling my father and telling him everything. Or maybe I should just flee and let everyone wonder why. In the end, I decided to let the night pass in silence. Rachel stayed with me. We went to her room because I could not bear to enter my own. Ale night, I lay awake on the couch in Rachel's hotel room, staring at the ceiling. Rachel dozed off in the bed, exhausted by the day's events, but I knew she stayed half awake out of concern for me. Occasionally, she would peek over to check if I was okay, and I would give a weak nod. My thoughts raced with uncertainty. How could Daniel do this? And why Brianna, of all people? It hurt deeply. I remembered the day I introduced Daniel to my family. Brianna had been polite, even friendly, but not overly warm. My stepmother, Carol, was quite fond of Daniel, and she beamed at the idea of us getting married. My father, too, had a special place in his heart for Daniel. In fact, Daniel often went fishing with Dad, helping him whenever he needed an extra pair of hands. Now I wondered if this closeness had just been an act to keep me from noticing what was going on behind my back. I tried to recall any sign that Brianna was attracted to Daniel. She had a history of dating different guys, but I never judged her for that. She often said she was trying to find the right person. Was Daniel just another fling for her, or did she have real feelings for him? It was confusing and painful. I felt betrayed by both of them. They were two of the people I trusted the most. At around 5 in the morning, I closed my eyes for a few minutes. I drifted in and out of a restless sleep, haunted by strange dreams. Every time I opened my eyes, I felt a crushing weight in my chest. The wedding was set for 10 o'clock that morning. No matter what happened, a decision had to be made. At 7, Rachel and I sat up, acknowledging there was no more time to waste. My phone was buzzing with messages and missed calls. Daniel had tried to contact me several times, and so had Brianna. I felt sick at the thought of hearing their voices. My father sent a text asking if I was ready, and reminded me that the photographer would arrive early. My relatives were gathering in the chapel. The florists were on their way. The caterer needed some last-minute confirmations. Everything that once felt like a dream was now a burden. Rachel looked at me with kindness in her eyes. "You have to talk to someone," she said quietly, "but do it on your own terms." I nodded. "I'll talk to my father first. He deserves to know." So I called him. It was one of the hardest calls I ever made. My father answered with a cheerful tone, but he grew worried when he heard my voice breaking. I told him I needed to meet him in private. He insisted on coming to see me right away, and I agreed. We arranged to meet in the small lounge near the chapel, where only wedding staff were allowed at that hour. When he arrived, I saw concern etched into every line of his face. He hugged me tightly, and I broke down in tears. Slowly, I told him everything, from the moment I opened that door to the moment I ran away. My father's jaw tightened, and his eyes darkened with anger. I could see his heart break too, but he tried to stay strong for me. He patted my shoulder, told me he loved me, and asked me what I wanted to do. It was a strange question, but it was the right one. My father was not going to decide for me. He wanted to support me, no matter what. I swallowed back tears, thinking about the guests and the entire day planned out. Yet, I knew I could not marry Daniel. The thought made me shudder. I said, "I can't go through with it, Dad. I can't marry someone who betrayed me." He nodded, looking solemn but supportive. "Then we will cancel," he said firmly. "I'll handle everything. Don't worry about the guests. Just focus on yourself." I felt a wave of gratitude for him. He pulled out his phone and began calling people to let them know that the wedding was off, or at least postponed. I cringed at the thought of gossip and pity, but none of that mattered more than my own peace. While he was making those calls, Daniel appeared. He looked disheveled and desperate, as if he had been searching everywhere for me. He tried to approach, but my father stood between us. "Let her be," Dad growled. "You've done enough." Daniel pleaded, "Alicia, please. Let me explain." I was not sure I wanted an explanation. Part of me felt there was nothing he could say that would make things better. But there was another part of me that needed to understand how he could have done this to me. So I signaled to my father that I would speak to Daniel alone. Reluctantly, Dad stepped away to give us some space. Daniel's eyes were red, and he looked like he had not slept at all. He kept running his fingers through his hair, glancing at me with shame. "I'm sorry," he began. "I never meant to hurt you." I stood there, silent for a moment, trying to hold my composure. Finally, I asked why. "Why Brianna? How long has this been going on?" He exhaled, looking at the ground. "It started a few months ago. It was a mistake. She was upset about her own life, and I was feeling stressed. We ended up confiding in each other, and things happened. I regretted it afterward, but I didn't know how to stop. She kept reaching out, and I was confused. We didn't plan any of this. It just happened." I felt a surge of anger. "It didn't just happen," I snapped. "You made choices. Both of you did. You kept this a secret from me, even as we planned our wedding." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I know. I was a coward. I didn't tell you because I knew it would destroy you, and I still loved you. But I couldn't bring myself to end things with her. She said she needed me, and I felt trapped. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him that he had no idea what real love was. But my voice shook when I spoke. You should have been honest. You owed me that much." He reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. "Alicia, I still want to marry you. This was a horrible mistake, but I love you. Please, let's talk it out. We can fix this." Fix this? The phrase felt empty. My trust was broken, and I felt like I would never be the same. I told Daniel, "There is no wedding today. I can't do it." Daniel's face fell. He started to cry, murmuring apologies. Part of me pitied him, because I had never seen him so broken. But another part of me was furious that he was only admitting his mistakes because he got caught. If I had never opened that door, he might have gone on to marry me while carrying on with Brianna. That thought churned my stomach. Just then, Brianna appeared, standing a few steps away. She looked disheveled too, her eyes wide with guilt and fear. She hesitated, as though she did not know if she was welcome to approach. In that moment, I felt rage bubble up. This was my stepsister, someone who should have respected me and cared about my happiness. Instead, she had chosen to betray me in the worst way. But I also saw pain in her expression. She had done something terrible, and now she had to face the consequences. I steeled myself, determined not to let my emotions ruin me further. I stepped toward her and asked in a firm voice, "Why did you do it?" She lowered her head, speaking in a trembling tone. "I'm sorry, Alicia. I don't have a good reason. I was lonely. I felt like you had the perfect life, and I was always in your shadow. Daniel was kind to me at a time when I felt desperate. I didn't think about how much it would hurt you, and I hate myself for it." Her words made me want to snap, but I could only manage a shaking breath. "You were my sister," I whispered. "You were supposed to be on my side." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I know. I'm so sorry. If I could take it back, I would. Please forgive me." Forgiveness seemed like a foreign concept at that moment. I was too raw, too hurt. I told them both to leave me alone. My father guided them away, and I was left standing there, struggling to breathe. The wedding staff moved around quietly in the background, unsure of what was happening, but sensing the tension. Rachel found me again and gave me a worried look. "Are you canceling everything?" she asked softly. I nodded. "I can't get married to him. It's impossible now." Word spread fast. Some guests found out before they even arrived, while others showed up at the chapel and learned that the ceremony was called off. My father made sure to keep the details vague, saying something came up and the wedding could not proceed. Meanwhile, I locked myself in a small back room, away from the chaos. My phone kept vibrating with messages from relatives, friends, and coworkers who were trying to understand what was happening. I felt drained, struggling to make sense of my own thoughts, let alone explain them to anyone else. Rachel stayed by my side, offering tissues, water, and quiet support. Then, an idea came to me. It was strange, but it offered a glimmer of peace. My father had spent a lot of money on this day, and everyone had gathered for a celebration. The chapel was decorated beautifully with flowers. The reception hall was set up, and the music was arranged. Did I really want all of that to go to waste because of Daniel and Brianna? I confided in Rachel, sharing the thought that had just crossed my mind. What if I still went through with the ceremony, just not with Daniel? I said hesitantly. Rachel's eyes widened. "Wait, what do you mean?" I shrugged, feeling a spark of hope for the first time that day. "I know it sounds insane, but hear me out. Everyone is already here. We have the chapel, the food, the decorations. Maybe I could turn this day into something else. Maybe I don't have to end it in tears and shame." She hesitated. "But who would you marry?" The question hung in the air. I recalled someone who had always been there for me, a close family friend who had once confessed feelings for me. But I was already with Daniel at the time. His name was Noah. We grew up together in the same neighborhood. He had moved away for a few years, but stayed in touch. We shared a deep bond that was never fully explored because I fell for Daniel. Yet, Noah had come to my wedding to support me as a friend, even though I knew it must have been hard for him. The thought of marrying Noah on the same day I discovered Daniel's betrayal was wild. It might seem impulsive and crazy, but something about it felt right. After all, he was someone who had always treated me with respect. He was honest and steady. If he would even agree to such a thing, it would be a leap of faith. But at that point, I felt like my life was already turned upside down. What did I have to lose by asking? Rachel's mouth fell open in surprise. "Noah, are you sure?" I let out a shaky laugh. "No, I'm not sure at all. But I know that marrying Daniel is not an option, and I don't want this entire day to become a permanent heartbreak. If Noah agrees, and if my father's okay with it, maybe we can turn this into a day of unexpected happiness rather than a day of betrayal." Rachel took a deep breath. "You're right about one thing. This is definitely unexpected. But if you feel strongly about it, I'll support you." So, with my heart pounding, I told my father about my idea. He was stunned, but he saw the determination in my eyes. "If Noah is willing, I will stand by you," he said, giving me a tired smile. "I just want you to be happy." I mustered up every bit of courage I had and went to find Noah. He was in the seating area outside the chapel, looking confused as guests whispered rumors about the canceled wedding. As soon as he saw me, he rushed over, worry all over his face. "Alicia, what's going on? Are you okay?" I took a deep breath. "I'm not marrying Daniel," I said. "I can't." His expression softened with sympathy. "I'm so sorry. I hope you're all right. Is there anything I can do?" I looked at him, my heart racing. "Yes," I replied. "There is something you can do. This might sound crazy, but would you consider marrying me today?" Noah blinked in shock. He took a step back, trying to see if I was joking, but he must have seen the seriousness in my face. "Marry you today? Alicia, this is your wedding day. You're supposed to be with Daniel." I shook my head. "Not anymore. He betrayed me. I found him with Brianna. It's over." My voice broke, but I fought back the tears. "I know this is sudden, and I don't expect you to say yes if you don't feel comfortable. But I can't let this day end in heartbreak. We have everything set up here, my family, our friends, even the dress. I don't want this to be a tragedy. I want to turn it into something new and hopeful." He stared at me, absorbing my words. I saw a flicker of sadness and longing in his eyes. For years, Noah had cherished me, and I had always valued him as a dear friend. We once had a connection that might have grown into something more if timing and circumstances were different. He swallowed, searching for the right words. "Alicia, I've always cared about you. I admit there was a time I wished I could be in Daniel's place. But this is so sudden. Are you sure you want to make such a big decision on a day like this?" I took his hands in mine, feeling warmth and a hint of steadiness. "I'm sure that I don't want to marry Daniel, but I'm not sure about anything else. All I know is that I trust you, and I've always felt safe with you. Maybe we can take this leap together. If you can't, I understand. But please, just think about it." He glanced around, noticing people watching us from a distance. He saw my father standing by with a worried but hopeful expression. Finally, Noah's gaze came back to me. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, taking in a deep breath. Then he nodded. "I'll do it, Alicia. I don't want you to face this pain alone. If marrying me today helps you find some light in this darkness, then yes, I will marry you." Relief and gratitude flooded me, and I wrapped my arms around Noah. For a moment, I felt like the heartbreak of the morning was lifting, replaced by a renewed sense of hope. This was not how I ever imagined my wedding would happen, but I refused to let Daniel's betrayal be the end of my happiness. If anything, it was the start of a new chapter. We spoke with my father, who was astonished, but did not fight me on it. He simply asked if I was absolutely certain. I told him I was sure that I did not want to marry Daniel, and that I wanted to give Noah a chance. That was enough for him. He gave Noah a firm handshake, welcomed him into the family, and then hurried off to speak to the officiant, the coordinator, and all the necessary people to switch the groom's name on the paperwork. Meanwhile, Rachel helped me fix my makeup and gave me a pep talk. I could see the questions in her eyes, but she stayed positive, reminding me that I deserved real love. "You look beautiful," she said as she adjusted my veil. "No matter what happens, I'm here for you." News traveled fast among the guests. Some were puzzled, some were worried, but others looked excited to witness a dramatic twist that no one saw coming. My father made a brief announcement that there had been a change in the wedding plan, and that the ceremony would continue shortly with a new groom. People gasped. A few even clapped, as though it was a heroic act on my part. I felt nervous, but also determined. When it was time for me to walk down the aisle, my heart pounded in my chest, but for different reasons than before. I stood with my father at the chapel entrance. Soft music played, and everyone rose to their feet. My eyes darted around, noticing the flowers and decorations that were supposed to be for Daniel's and my special day. Now, they belonged to me and Noah, a man who had quietly stood by me for many years. I felt a wave of conflicting emotions, sadness for the betrayal, but also warmth for the chance to start anew. My father squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "I'm proud that you had the strength to walk away from someone who hurt you and still find the courage to open your heart to another." With that, we began the slow march down the aisle. I saw the faces of friends, relatives, and coworkers, some with tears, others with gentle smiles. At the end of the aisle stood Noah, looking handsome in a formal suit, although it wasn't the one originally tailored for the groom. He stood tall, his eyes fixed on me. There was a mix of awe and tenderness on his face. My gaze shifted to Daniel, who was standing to the side. His face was pale, and he looked shattered. Next to him was Brianna, her eyes red from crying. For a moment, my heart squeezed. It was painful to see them both, but I knew I was doing the right thing. I had to choose my own happiness rather than cling to a promise that had been broken before it was even made. The ceremony was surreal. Instead of the minister going through the usual script about how Daniel and I had met, He read words about love and resilience. It felt shorter, more improvised, but somehow more genuine. Noah held my hands the entire time, his grip strong and reassuring. As I looked into his eyes, I realized that, though this was not a fairy tale wedding, it was an honest moment of connection. When the time came for vows, we spoke from our hearts. I admitted that I was standing there unexpectedly. My life turned upside down in just one morning. But I chose Noah because I believed in his goodness and sincerity. He responded by telling me that he had cared for me for a long time, quietly hoping I would find true happiness. He promised to be by my side, not just as a partner but as a friend. Tears filled my eyes as we exchanged rings. The guests clapped and cheered, some crying, some with expressions of astonishment. Even though the day had started with heartbreak, it was ending with a spark of hope that I never imagined possible. When we sealed our vows with a kiss, I felt a weight lift off my chest. It was as if I could finally breathe. This was not the wedding I planned, but it was a wedding that felt real. My father hugged me, tears in his eyes, telling me he was proud. Rachel was sobbing with relief, holding my bouquet and hugging me tight. After the ceremony, we moved to the reception hall. The staff had done their best to change the name cards, but some remained from the original plan. It was chaotic, but nobody seemed to mind. People were talking in excited tones, calling this the most dramatic wedding they had ever attended. My father made a short speech, acknowledging that the day did not go as planned, but celebrating that love can prevail in unexpected ways. He raised a toast to me and Noah, wishing us a bright future together. I could see Daniel and Brianna in a far corner. They looked forlorn, as if they did not know what to do with themselves. Part of me felt pity for them, and another part felt angry and betrayed. For a moment, Daniel approached me and Noah, his hands trembling. He cleared his throat and forced out, "Congratulations. I'm sorry for everything." I stared at him, my chest tight. Finally, I nodded stiffly. "Thank you," I managed to say, not wanting to create a scene. Brianna tried to meet my gaze, but I quickly looked away. I did not have the strength to deal with her at that moment. My father took them aside later, telling them it would be best if they left, and they did. The reception continued, and while it was not the grand party I had originally planned, there was still dancing, laughter, and food. I sat at a table with Noah, holding his hand as we talked with our friends and family. Rachel teased us, saying that someday we would look back on this crazy day and laugh. In the weeks that followed, the initial shock gave way to a new rhythm of life. Noah and I took our marriage day by day, learning about each other in ways we had not before. We moved into a small apartment near my workplace. My father supported me through the emotional fallout of what happened with Daniel, and I sought therapy to cope with the betrayal. Brianna tried to reach out a few times, sending messages saying how sorry she was. At first, I refused to respond, but eventually, I found the courage to sit down and meet with her. Our conversation was painful, but it gave me a chance to release the anger that had been knotted in my chest. I told her how much she hurt me and how I would need time to heal. She wept, begging for my forgiveness. I told her I was not ready yet, but maybe in the future I could let go of the resentment. For now, I needed my space. Daniel moved away. I did not hear much from him after that, except a brief note apologizing again for his mistake. He said he hoped I was happy now. In a strange way, I was. Despite the hurt he caused, I had found something more genuine with Noah. We took our days slowly, going on small dates, cooking together in our new home, and learning each other's quirks. As time passed, I realized that the wedding was only the beginning of our story. Noah was patient and caring, never pushing me to forget what had happened, but encouraging me to grow stronger from it. I began to trust again, discovering that real love is not just about romance, but also about respect, honesty, and kindness. We decided to renew our vows a year later in a simpler ceremony, just to mark our marriage on our own terms. It was a small gathering at a local park, where we stood under the open sky with only our closest friends and family. My father walked me down a short aisle once again, this time with a smile that came from a place of real peace. Rachel stood by my side, wiping away tears of joy. Noah and I promised to remain faithful and supportive to each other, remembering the lessons we learned from a wedding that began with betrayal but ended with hope. In the end, I found that life can break you in unexpected ways, but it can also surprise you with new blessings when you least expect them. My wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and though it started as the worst, it led me to a place of genuine love and happiness. Yes, there was sadness and anger, but there was also redemption and forgiveness. Over time, I have come to see it as the day I chose my own worth over a lie. I found the strength to stand up for myself and ended up discovering a love that was real. Noah and I are still together, building a life filled with trust and laughter. My father remains a steady pillar of support. Rachel continues to be my best friend, always ready to remind me of how far I've come. As for Brianna, we are on polite terms now. I have forgiven her in my heart, even if our relationship has never fully returned to what it was. Some scars remain, but they no longer control me. Today, I look back on that unsettling night when I opened the door and my world collapsed. I remember the crushing pain and the tears that seemed endless. But I also remember the moment Noah said yes, and how it felt like a lifeline pulling me out of the darkness. In the end, I did marry someone on my wedding day. Someone who proved that true love can come from the most unexpected moments, even in the wake of betrayal. And because of that, despite all the heartbreak, I can say that my story has a happy ending.